Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with Dan Dixon from Endeavor Silver. In today's interview, we discuss the precious metals market and how it might be impacted by everything going on with tariffs, as well as Endeavor. We get into the production numbers, their latest acquisition, and what investors can expect from the company out of the next 12 months. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Dan, it's good to see you again.
Great seeing you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So I like to start out these interviews sort of talking about what's happening in the world. And I got to say, I wake up every morning. I typically turn on CNBC and Fox Business and some of the other financial news programs and just kind of try to get a temperature of what's happening in the financial world. And right now, everybody's basically acting like these tariffs are the end of the US economy as we know it. There's not a lot of mincing words. The usual suspects who defend Trump aren't on his side on this one. We even saw Elon come out
Yeah.
against tariffs after being on Team Trump for the last number of months. So look, you work in the precious metal space. This all does come back to precious metals because at the end of the day, if the US dollar loses its reserve status, that next currency in line is likely precious metals.
Yep.
And I'm sure you're following this. So I'm curious what's going through your head right now as you're watching all this drama unfold.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little disbelief, probably on the same side that everything you learn in an economic class is tariffs aren't generally a good thing long term. And I think it's hard for people in business to make medium term to long term decisions when everything is the way it is right now. And you got moving parts on a daily, hourly basis of what's happening globally. Obviously, every country has its own pride, for lack of a better term, that honestly it doesn't help with the rhetoric that's around the tariffs and ultimately long-term ramifications of globalization. It looks like isolation, more isolation from the countries, and everything we've been taught is that it's not historically good for the world economy and ultimately trade.
So when it comes to what you guys do as a miner, and I know you guys just recently announced an acquisition of a producer on top of what you guys already have going on in production. So when you're thinking about being an operator in the mining space and you hear about all this tariff stuff, is it impacting how you guys operate at all?
Not so much. I mean, we look at our supply chain and where some of our inputs are coming from. For us, we're underground vein miners, so our largest input's labor. Obviously, the tariffs are impacting currency valuations, and we saw a run to the US dollar, and today we're actually seeing a run away from the US dollar. So, a third of our costs aligned to Mexican pesos just for labor. Obviously, our powers comes out of Mexico. It's also aligned to the Mexican peso. About 50 to 55% of our costs are tied to the US dollar, and whether we source some of those inputs out of Mexico or whether we source some of those inputs out of the United States, would be impacted by tariffs, but we're impacted very little compared to the rest of the marketplace. That's for sure.
So let's get into Endeavor. You guys just put out some production results. What can you tell us?
Yeah, we put out Q1 results down the runway. Bolañitos and NYSE, we've been operating there 19 years, 19 and 18 years respectively. We have a very good handle of what we do, and ultimately, our guidance this year was 7 to 8 million silver equivalent ounces. We came in at 1.9 for Q1, so kind of right on track for that for the year. And I think most of the people are really focused on our Terronera project, which is coming into wet commissioning here early Q2. And production's great. It's what's been paying the bills, but everybody's really excited about the growth that we have coming with Terronera.
Now, production was down versus a year ago. Was this expected?
It was expected. That was in our plan. With slightly or with the much higher prices, we have slightly lower grades. We can go into areas, still make profit from those various areas in the mine. Ultimately, our constraints at the mine is capacity of throughput, so 1,200 tons per day, effectively at each operation. So a little less grade, meaning little less actual ounces produced, but obviously better cash flows and a longer mine life, extending mine lives at both those operations.
So, looking at the big picture here, when we start talking about Terronera, how is construction progressing here, and when can we expect commercial production?
Yeah, I mean, we're coming into the final days and weeks, or weeks and days, probably is a better way to say that for Terronera. Our upper platform, which is crushing, grinding, and flotation, that's ultimately complete. We've gone through dry commissioning. Uh, Secondly is our lower platform, which is our concentrate filter and our filter press. Our filter press has always been our critical path to actual wet commissioning. The mine's in great shape. Tailings dam's in great shape. We're to the height of the dam for life of mine. As we've had these delays over the last 2 months to get into wet commissioning, the mines continue to advance and we get to deeper levels in the mine, keep on opening up more stopes for ultimately to ensure we can run 2,000 tons per day when we get into commercial production. Ultimately, if we can start wet commissioning by the end of April, we expect to ramp up, be in commercial production, hopefully in July. Maybe it ends up being early August, but we expect a pretty quick ramp up.
Just for our audience, what is wet commissioning?
Oh, it allows us to actually take the dirt from the front. So what we're putting into the crusher, we take out the silver and gold and other small amounts of metals, and at the end you have your waste, which is your dirt. We actually push out all the water that we use during it. We recycle that water, and then we take that tailings, what we call tailings, the waste, and put it on our tailings dam. So it allows us to go from start to finish and it adds water all the way through, and again push that water out. That's why we call it. We have dry commissioning and then wet commissioning. Wet commissioning effectively is commissioning the whole plant.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what kind of annual production are you guys expecting out of Terronera once it gets fully operational and at
Yeah,
scale?
it's about 4.5 million ounces of silver, 38,000 ounces of gold. So on an equivalent basis, first 4 years, about just shy of 7 million silver equivalent ounces. And again, we have a 10-year life there with 96 million ounce silver equivalent in our reserves.
So, on this topic of growth, you guys just announced an acquisition of an operating mine in Peru. Sounds pretty exciting. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it is exciting. I mean, a lot of work's gone into it. We've kind of worked on that project since fall of last year, even late summer. Um, for us, it's our first foray into Peru. Peru's the third largest producer of silver globally, Mexico being one, China being two. So we think it's a natural fit to move over to Peru. We're in the Ayacocha state, ultimately where Copa is. It's been operating for almost 25 years. It was taken over by a more of a sophisticated group and grown from 800 tons to 2,000 tons per day over the last kind of 12 years. And for now, it produces about 5 million silver equivalent ounces per year. It is broken down between silver, zinc, lead, and a little bit of copper. It's got plans to go to 2,500 tons per day, but most importantly, it's cash flowing. It's supporting its own expansion with its cash flows, and like I say, we love the exploration upside there and the potential for the Copa mine.
So, how did you guys manage to fund this acquisition?
Yeah, we did on the announcement of the acquisition. We announced an equity offering for $40 million. We raised or sold the copper. So we did a copper stream on the Copa asset, which was 4% of the revenue. That raised 35 million. And then ultimately we're paying $65 million in shares. So 45 million dollars was raised through equity, 35 million on a stream. That was 80 million in cash, and then a $65 million share payment we make to the vendors on close.
So, what sort of mine life and reserves does the project currently have?
That's a good question. Under Canadian 43-101 guidelines, I mean, we have to be very conservative on that. Historic reserves suggested almost a 9-year mine life. There's about 118 million ounces silver equivalent that was defined at Copa. Endeavor as a company, we have to go in and verify some of that, effectively twinning drill holes, doing our own work, and we'll come out with a 43-101, but we expect it to be somewhere in that level. If if reserves and resources end up being 100 to 120 million ounce silver equivalent, we have an additional payment to the vendors for another $10 million. And we quite frankly expect to make that payment. It's within 24 months of close.
So one thing that we were having a discussion about this morning, and this might sound like a silly question, but the ASIC on the new acquisition in Peru, I believe it's somewhere in the ballpark of $22.80, give or take.
Yep.
And you're expecting 5.1 million silver equivalent ounces.
Yep.
Now, the question becomes, let's just say that theoretically we want to pencil in on a napkin $33 silver that you're able to sell that at. Not saying that you will be able to sell it at
Yep.
that price, but let's just say theoretically we want to do that. Does that mean that
Yep.
you guys will be making $10 per silver equivalent ounce, or
No,
does that?
that would be only on silver ounces. So
Yeah,
your
okay.
cash costs and your all-in sustaining costs are always calculated. We calculate on a byproduct basis, which lines up with the World Gold Council, the Silver Institute, of how to calculate cash costs and all-in sustaining costs. The actual silver produced is 2 million ounces of silver, and the revenues coming from zinc, lead, and copper are offsetting against actual cost of sales. So ultimately, it's the $2 times 10 or $11. Ultimately, you use it 73, so it's $22 million of after-tax cash flow. But again, that includes your G&A costs, your sustaining capital, and exploration programs. If you take just cash costs, which is your operating costs, it's about $12. So our operating is $20 of operating profit times 2 million. It's $40 million of cash flow.
I appreciate that answer for two reasons. First off, it was a very competent answer, which most of my CEOs we ask don't give us one. And secondly, even if they did know, they might try to tiptoe around that, um, and that's helpful because we were actually having that discussion of, does that ASIC, like, is it net of byproduct? So it's not really fair to use the silver
It's
equivalent
not
ounce
fair, and
number.
it's even for us. I mean, we're always very careful on trying to say, and that's why even with Terronera, I'd kind of start with it's 4.5 million ounces and 38,000 ounces of gold. Everybody wants that one number. Hey, how many ounces in a silver equivalent basis? You can just say that. It's a lot different when I say 2 million ounces of silver, 20,000 tons of zinc, 20,000 tons of lead, and 500 tons of copper. To do that calculation quickly, very difficult. You can't do that back on that in calculation. So people go, well, what's an equivalence basis? So revenue, 5 million times 30. Okay, it's going to have revenue of $150 million. That allows you to get to some of those financial metrics you're looking for. But I am an accountant by trade, so I can answer that probably easier than some CEOs, and I have no problem doing it. And when you look at it, when you look at what we purchased Copa for, I think it was a fair price. Why we really like it is obviously we expect upside in the silver price. We see it moving significantly, especially with what's happening globally. Uh, and then on top of it, the exploration upside at Copa we think is tremendous. And then again, expansion opportunity to go from 2,000 tons to 2,500 tons imminently. So a lot of avenues for us to kind of outgain what we paid for it.
What's your long run goal here? Like, if we're talking 5 years from now, 2030, December 31st, if you and I, for some reason, are nerdy enough to be sitting around on December 31st, 2030, just talking about Endeavor Silver, what would you
Yeah.
consider to be a successful run rate for the company in five
Yeah. Well,
years?
first off, I am probably nerdy enough to sit down 5 years from now and have a conversation. Um, the biggest thing for us is we want to be a senior silver producer, and Terronera is obviously a keystone asset. It's going to be one of the lowest cost producing silver assets in our space, and the silver space is very small. You've got 5 or 6 names that would have a larger market cap than us produce as considered primary silver producers. We also have an asset called Pizzeria in Mexico. Pizzeria is one of the world's largest undeveloped silver deposits. It's got 600 million ounces of silver defined there, plus zinc and lead. Everyone knows the Pizzeria project as an open pit project from when it was held by Silver Standard. We've been looking at it from an underground standpoint, and we think it's the next mine that we're going to build after Terronera. We want to move our engineering team from Terronera to Pizzeria. And I say all this because our goal in 5 years is to have Guanaceví, Bolañitos, our existing assets, Terronera in production, 7. That takes us to basically 15 million ounce silver production. We add in Copa, takes us to 20 million silver equivalents. And Pitarrilla itself could be upwards of 7 million ounces silver plus zinc and lead. So even 11, 12 million silver equivalent ounces. So we can get into that 30 million silver equivalent ounce ranges, which is a great story, huge growth. And in Colpa, Guanaceví, Terronera, we can leverage that cash flow to build Pitarrilla, which will be a bigger mine to build than even Terronera. I think it'll be a very good success story. I think silver is going to be a lot higher, and you'll see Endeavor will be completely different than it was in 2024. Ultimately, 6 years later.
Okay. So last question for you. If I'm an investor in Endeavor, or I'm watching the company and I'm trying to evaluate how you are performing as management, what should I expect out of the company over the next 12 months?
Yeah, the biggest thing is Terronera's commercial production. So that's first and foremost, and ultimately how Terronera performs, which you think will be very good. The integration of Colpa. So ultimately, by this time next year, our Q1 production should almost be 5 million ounce silver equivalent on its own. I mean, we just did 1.9, so you've got massive growth. It's all that's what we can control. I think the other aspect that needs to get shaken out here in the market is obviously the silver price. Today, gold to silver ratio is almost 100 to 1. Obviously, these early April timelines is all around tariffs. We've got a lot of volatility in the marketplace. Everything's moving hourly, it seems like. I expect that ratio to tighten and get back down to 65, which is the long-term gold or silver to gold ratio. And then you'll see a lot higher silver prices. So I expect significant cash flow coming out of this entity a year from now.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks very much for hopping on here. Hopefully, this time next year, we can evaluate all that cash flow, and we can have a bunch of happy shareholders who are watching that interview. But thanks very much for doing this. And we've always got our eyes on what you guys are doing.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Much appreciated.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Guys, also let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching, everyone.